Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Good to see you. Good to have you here with us. It's JEB in Flow on the Street Parking Podcast channel. So this week, I want to talk about something. I want to start the conversation, let's say, because I've been talking about this for a while, especially if you've been listening to JEB in Flow for a while, back when we were on Facebook Live, about wanting to have a special guest on to talk about sleep, and I'm zeroing in on that. We're getting close, so stay tuned. But I want to start the conversation and talk about something that's extremely important. I think we all know it's important, but for some reason we allow it to take a backseat to pretty much everything else in our life. And what I'm talking about is sleep. Let me start, as I like to often do, with a quote that I thought was really good. The quote says, "Dreaming permits each and every one of us to be quietly and safely insane every night of our lives." And that quote is from Dr. William Dement, and he is known as the father of sleep medicine. He wrote a book called The Promise of Sleep, and he founded the Sleep Research Institute at Stanford University. So I've been digging into some of that research and reading a little bit about sleep because I've always known it was important. I'm in a period right now where, with a somewhat new baby, she's 5 months old, we are still trying to figure out the whole sleep thing. And I definitely am feeling the effects of inconsistent sleep, being underslept, and I didn't realize just how subtle, but how dramatic at the same time, sleep can affect everything. So one of the things that frameworks, I guess you could say, that we can look at this within is performance. Not necessarily just athletic performance, but overall just performance of your daily life required duties. So when it comes to performance, there's sort of four categories, four pillars. You've got cognitive performance, there is physical performance, emotional, and social. And sleep can profoundly impact all four of those. So if you think about what happens if you don't get enough sleep, you can be cranky, which is maybe a result of your emotional reaction to things. It can affect your social interaction with people, but your cognitive function is impaired, and that can also be frustrating. A lot of times this stuff can happen, you don't even know it. And then, of course, the physical. And we'll probably talk mostly about the physical, but we'll get into a little bit of everything. So when it comes to the results on your body and in all of the biological processes that happen in your body that come from not getting enough sleep, it can be anything from slower reaction times and an impaired situational awareness, which kind of also falls in the cognitive category. But your risk of injury goes up. Your immune system can be suppressed, so your risk of catching a cold or getting sick also goes up. So one thing I thought was interesting in some of my reading was they talked about how in a lot of these big catastrophes that have happened, like the Exxon Valdez oil tanker spill and the meltdowns at 3 Mile Island and at Chernobyl and the Navy destroyers, the USS Fitzgerald and John McCain, both had collisions, not with each other, separate incidents. But in all of those things, sleep deprivation and fatigue were listed and cited as contributing factors to those catastrophes. The scientists at NASA, when trying to prepare for this launch in the weeks leading up to it, were overworked and were underslept. And when they look at what went wrong with the O-ring in the shuttle or in one of the boosters, I'm not real familiar with the nuts and bolts of the tragedy, but when they looked at what was going on with all of the hardware, the mechanics, there was like a 96% chance that that was going to happen, and they didn't catch it. The warning light at 3 Mile Island went off at like 4 a.m, and people were half asleep, and they didn't see the light blinking saying, hey, there's an emergency. And after these 2 collisions with the Navy, they actually started to investigate some of the practices and policies that they had in place and have made some changes as far as studying sleep and allowing the service members in the Navy to get more sleep. Now, if you're in the Navy and you don't feel like you've been getting enough sleep or had an opportunity, this is just what I had read, so I'm not really sure how far these policies, new policies and investigations have penetrated into the Navy, but it seems like wheels are in motion. And I think it's really interesting kind of what's happening with the military right now with some of the people that I've gotten to know and interviewed. They're like my friend, Dr. John Gassaway, who I had on here a while back, is conducting mindfulness training with fighter pilots for the Air Force. And the Navy is implementing some new sleep and recovery techniques. And so I think there's a lot of cool, interesting things that are happening. And I know that it takes a long time for that to make its way through, but I believe it's going in a cool direction, which I think is great. And for our members, we have so many members in street parking that are service members, first responders, honestly, that work in like emergency medicine, police, fire, and we have a ton of new moms. And honestly, I feel like being a new mom in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to sleep, is similar to like being deployed. You know, there's a lot of things that could happen at any time. You have to be ready for things, but you have to be ready for the unknown and be prepared for the unknowable. It's crazy. So I think that what I want to try to do is appreciate and respect the fact that there are certain things that are in place for a lot of you guys that can't be changed. But if we can control or manage, if we can control what we can control, and we can sort of try to manage the things that we can't control, that are beyond our control, we can still have some positive action in the area of sleep and rest and recovery. So I know that for a lot of folks, when you say, oh yeah, you've got to get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep, for 70% of the population, it's like 7 to 9 hours of sleep is what you need. And that is not something that is debatable or changeable. From what I understand, if you're a person that needs 8 hours, you can't train yourself to only sleep 4 hours and have your body be as well recovered or to perform as good as getting 8 hours. So the amount of sleep that you need is the amount of sleep that you need. Now, some folks it's 9, some folks it's 10, some folks it's 8, maybe some folks it's 7. Very, very, very few people is it less than that. So let's talk about that thing first, because I know so many people that are like, oh, I only sleep 6 hours a night. I only sleep 5 hours a night. I know people that are like, oh, I only sleep 4 hours. That's all I sleep. I wake up. Well, maybe there's been some discipline and you've trained your body to wake up after 4 hours, or maybe there's other things going on in your body or in your brain that are waking you up after 4 hours. That doesn't necessarily mean that your body has gotten enough sleep. One example that I think helps illustrate that is if you wake up every morning and before you leave the house, you brush your teeth. And when you're brushing your teeth, you look in the mirror and you look the same. You look pretty much the same. Like, I look pretty much the same in the mirror as I did yesterday. I feel like I've always looked pretty much the same when I look in the mirror. But then when I look at a picture of myself 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I'm like, dang, I looked so different. I was so young. I still feel really young. I think I'm always going to feel about the same age, which is pretty young and immature. It's crazy that I have a child. But anyways, that's what's called renorming. All that means is what might feel normal to you could actually be a sleep-deprived state. But because you've so gradually gotten into that state, you don't notice it. I know, like, for example, if I do a couple of air squats and they feel like air squats, and then I do a bunch of mobility work on one leg in my hip, and I do a few more air squats, all of a sudden I feel like I have two different legs. It's like, I can't believe I've been walking around like that. I had no idea that I was that tight and had that much tension. So this renorming process gives us the idea that, oh, we're fine. This is the amount of energy that I always have, and this is a sufficient amount of energy. But if you were to actually get an adequate amount of sleep and pay off your sleep debt, which we'll talk about in a second, then you would be pretty surprised at how much more energy you would have, how much more cognitive function you would have, how much more focus you would have, motivation, all of these kinds of things. So, sleep debt. When we get into a sleep-deprived state, we basically go into sleep debt. And sleep debt is something that has been observed, it was theorized and then observed in William Dement's research at Sleep Institute. So it is a thing. You can pay it off. So if, for example, you need to get 49 hours of sleep every week, roughly 7 hours a night, but you have a week where you're busy, or, you know, for folks that are maybe on deployment, you're sleeping like 5 hours. So then you basically owe 14 hours of sleep at the end of the week. The good news is there is a ceiling to the sleep debt, which is about 50 hours. So you can actually get caught up. One thing that you cannot do is bank a bunch of sleep. So you can't sleep for 10 hours a night every single night, knowing that the following week you're only going to sleep for 5 hours every night. That extra sleep isn't going to do anything moving forward. The only thing it's going to do is maybe help pay off some of the sleep debt that you've already incurred. And if you can get, he says basically, if you can pay off your sleep debt, like getting 10 hours of sleep a night for 3 to 5 weeks, which to me, that sounds like I have no idea how that's possible. But if you can do it, then you're kind of back to normal. And then you can start, for example, testing how much sleep you actually need to get by getting 9 hours one night, see how you feel, getting 8 hours the next night, see how you feel. And by how you feel, the best way, kind of the easiest way to test would be, how do you feel after lunch. So you have this natural circadian rhythm, you have these patterns, and you actually do, no matter what, you get a little urge to sleep after lunch. How strong of an urge kind of depends on how sleep deprived you are. So for people that are getting enough sleep, they may not even feel that urge, or they might get a little bit of a drowsiness feeling, but it's not anything that's going to impair what they're doing. I know that there's been periods in my life where I'll eat lunch and then I cannot even keep my eyes open for a couple of hours, and I just really have to fight it. So a lot of people go get coffee in the early afternoon. And then when we start adding in things like caffeine and other stimulants, well, then maybe we're wired at night and when we can't go to sleep. And then we get into things like alcohol or Ambien or whatever to try and make us go to sleep. And then now you're in this cycle of trying to put all this weird chemicals and substances in your body to just be able to do what your body will naturally do if it's allowed to function properly. So we'll get into strategies in a second. Let's talk first, just so I can try to really help you understand the importance of sleep. Because I think we all say, oh, yeah, sleep's important. Sleep's important. Sure, I'll get enough sleep one of these days. But if you have any kind of performance goals, fitness goals, body composition goals, almost the foundation of that should be sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, your nutrition will be affected, your performance will be affected, but also your body's ability to reap the benefits of nutrition, of weightlifting, of cardiovascular type exercise will also be affected. So, for example, if you don't get enough sleep, if you're consistently getting less than 6 hours of sleep, the way that your body metabolizes carbohydrate changes, and it cannot use it in the same ways. So carbohydrate gets broken down into glucose. Your brain, its primary fuel source is glucose. Some of that glucose from the carbohydrates goes into the muscles. It gets converted to glycogen and stored in the muscles for energy, for later use. And if that's not happening, then you don't have energy. Less than 6 hours of sleep, your immune system doesn't function the way that it should. And inflammation can go up. So inflammation is one of those things, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on another day, but inflammation is one of those things that gets a bad rap. Acute instances of inflammation, like right after you work out, are important. It's part of the muscle remodeling process. So it's good. Your body's trying to heal itself and to repair. But chronic inflammation is very, very destructive to your health. And one of the biggest sources of chronic inflammation is lack of sleep. So when you consistently do not get enough sleep, it's like your risk of all kinds of different diseases goes up, cardiovascular disease, any stress-related diseases, brain diseases. So when you sleep during let's say you're an 8-hour person and you need 8 hours of sleep, because that's like the average. Hours 5, 6, and 7 of the night that you're sleeping, that is when you go into the deepest sleep, when you have the longest period of REM cycles. If you don't get that last couple of hours, you're missing out on that deep, deep sleep. When you go into those deep, deep levels of sleep, basically what happens is that this spinal fluid, they use the term bathes. The brain bathes in this spinal fluid. And what that does is it removes all of these toxic proteins from the brain. It flushes it out. So essentially, you're cleaning your brain. You have like this cleaning crew that goes into your brain every night, and it scrubs and it mops and it Windexes and it makes everything nice and sparkly clean. If that cleaning crew gets half the amount of time that it needs to do the job, it's not going to do a very good job. And if it gets half the amount of time or not close to 100% of the full amount of time, over time, consistently, if that happens over and over and over again, parts of your brain just stop being able to do what they need to do. It's like a form of atrophy. What was the other thing about the brain I wanted to say? Yeah, so the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making, for judgment. It's something that we can manipulate when we go into a flow state, which is pretty cool. But with a lack of sleep, the prefrontal cortex basically goes to sleep. Its activity goes way down. So then the decision-making happens in the part of your brain that's responsible for emotions. So you start to make decisions based on emotion. And that almost never is a good thing. It's not a great idea to be making your decisions based off of your emotions, especially if your emotions are running wild because you are stressed and your cortisol levels are high and you're not getting enough sleep. So they've also done studies with injury, and you're almost twice as likely to get injured when you are underslept. That's crazy. If you're going out there every day and you are moving barbells and heavy weights and you're doing explosive movements, ballistic type movements, and you're not moving perfectly, which basically none of us are, especially when we're doing movements for time, technique breaks down. It just does. And most of the time you can get away with that if the loads are appropriate and your technique is good enough. But if you're underslept, your risk of injury almost doubles. That's gnarly. So what can we do? Probably the best thing that we can do is improve our sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is, this might be a new concept for most of you. Sleep hygiene is three things. It's the quality of your sleep, it's the quantity of your sleep, and it's the consistency of your sleep. So where have we heard that before? With nutrition, with exercise, with mindfulness, with everything, right? It's the quality, it's the quantity, and it's the consistency. So if you can do some little things to improve the quality and the quantity and the consistency of your sleep, everything will get better. Not only will your sleep get better and will you get more of it, but your health can improve, your immune system can improve, your athletic performance can improve, your social interaction can improve, your cognitive abilities can improve, your situational awareness will improve. Almost everything gets better. Why is it so hard to just try to get better sleep, more consistent sleep? Because we have so much stimulation in our lives. And a lot of this is job related. So to use the example of someone that's on deployment, which is a kind of an extreme example, or someone that is a shift worker. We have a lot of shift workers. If you're doing 24-hour shifts at the ER, you're not going to get 8 hours of sleep. You know that. I know that. That is your job. I don't expect you to quit your job. Let's accept that that's the reality. And then now what can you do? Well, hopefully you're not working 7 24-hour shifts in a row. So when you do get to a place where you have more control over your surroundings and your schedule, then you can take action to improve your sleep. And you can start to pay off some of that sleep debt. Having a sleep routine is one of the best ways that you can improve your sleep hygiene, especially in the quality of your sleep and in the consistency of your sleep. So the quantity is a tough one. We have so many things in our lives that dictate how much we sleep. If you have control, or if you think that maybe there's a possibility, I encourage you to question some of the things. Do I really need to do this? Do I need to stay up this late, or do I need to get up that early? Is it more important, considering now what you know about how important and how influential sleep is on the rest of your life? Are there some things that we can change to allow us to get more sleep? And I think for most of us, there are. Now, as far as the quality of the sleep and the consistency, the best thing that you can do is establish a bedtime routine. And I am somebody that also needs to do this, and I've been playing around with it. I'm doing pretty good. I'm consistent so far, but still very new, that I've really been trying to work on a bedtime routine, because the urgency of that, it has become super important with a new baby, that like I need to, not just for her, but also for me, have some sort of routine. We are creatures of habit. We need routine. Our body functions on a rhythm, and we need to honor that. So that's actually what the action item is for this week, is to come up with a bedtime routine. If you've already got one, please share it with me and everyone else, because I would love to know what you guys are doing. Here's a couple of sort of do's and don'ts. The do's, basically, if it's not a don't, whatever you want to do, okay? The don'ts are devices and anything really that's spitting out blue light. So your devices, it's so easy to get in bed and then pull out your phone or your iPad, your tablet, whatever, put on the TV, and you've got these big, bright images and all of this blue light blasting you in the face. Blue light, the reason why the sky is blue is because the blue light that's coming from the sun is getting scattered and bouncing around off of all of the molecules in the atmosphere and stuff like that. So we kind of perceive blue light as daylight. And so at nighttime, when you're getting hit with a lot of blue light, it's stimulating. We want to eliminate that. I got some pretty sweet glasses the other day that I've been wearing, and it's crazy. They block out like 99% of the blue light, and they look really goofy, and they turn everything kind of like orange. But I notice a huge difference when I put them on when the sun goes down to when I feel like it's time for me to go to bed. I am much, much more prepared and ready to go to sleep, and I actually go to sleep a lot faster. So even if you are going to look at your phone, which you shouldn't, I recommend taking that stuff out. But if you got these cool glasses, you can find them on Amazon or whatever, but just make sure they're not the fashionable ones, because those don't actually block any of the blue light. So you got to get the ones that are like yellow or orange. And they'll say, make sure they give you a number of how much blue light they block. So some of the things that you can do would be stretching. We have a lot of great maintenance videos, and there's a couple like cool down, decompression, bedtime maintenance. All of those are really good for sort of down regulating your whole nervous system and stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system to relax you and prepare you for rest. So stretching is a really good one. Reading is a really good one. Make sure you're not using an LED light, which has a lot of blue light, but like a halogen lamp to light up your book or wear your glasses for the Kindle or whatever. White noise. I'm a big fan of white noise or any kind of relaxing type music or sounds. You can read to your kids, get creative. You do whatever it is that you want to do. But if you have an established bedtime routine and you do it every single night, it will help improve the quality of your sleep. So the action item, we're going to keep it real easy. Minimum 5 minutes. You can make it as long as you want. Minimum 5 minutes. Come up with a bedtime routine that you do for at least 5 minutes every single night this week. And just pay attention to your energy levels the next day, especially after you eat lunch, and the quality of your sleep when you wake up in the morning. Kind of pay attention to like how rested you feel, how you felt like you slept the night before. And if you do that for a week, I bet that after 7 days, you will feel a difference. And you can imagine if you did that every night, forever. But just do it one night at a time. So that's it. Quality, quantity, consistency. Sleep is hugely important. It affects everything else. So see where you can improve little by little the amount of sleep that you get, the quality of sleep that you get, and how consistently you can do that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I love you, and I will talk to you soon.